Well, señores y señoras, buenas tardes. Hello. We are very happy to welcome you at this workshop focusing on social enterprises and cooperatives and asking a very important question, how the fringe is becoming mainstream. So it would be an interesting debate, certainly. Perhaps I will start by introducing myself. I'm Anna Fanasopoulou. I work at the European Commission, where I'm heading a unit called Proximity, Social Economy and Creative Industries. So we have the habit of working with the social economy, but because we are part of DigiGrow, clearly we have the habit of working with SMEs, with industry, and with a single market. I'm actually just coming back from San Sebastian, where yesterday and today is taking place a European conference on social economy organized by the Spanish presidency. And perhaps what I would like, before I introduce our panel, is share with you a few pieces of information that could be interesting, perhaps, regarding social economy and the European agenda. First of all, in San Sebastian, there was a big amount of enthusiasm shared because indeed the social economy seems to be finding its place on the European policy agenda, both with the adoption of an action plan, a European action plan on the social economy, roughly 2 years ago in December 2021, but also because when we look at the EU industrial strategy, with which perhaps most of you are perhaps more familiar with, one of the 14 industrial ecosystems that the EU industrial strategy is identifying as important for the twin green and digital transition and for the long-term resilience of the EU economies and societies is called proximity and social economy. And that has its interest in itself. So if we look at numbers, what are the numbers, the figures for the social economy? We're looking at 2.8 million enterprises, which are called social economy enterprises. They represent about 10% of all businesses in the EU. And when we look at employment, how many jobs these enterprises create, we're looking at 13.6 million people employed, which is not a number to be neglected. But what are the actors, the type of businesses or organizations or entities lying behind those figures? I think this is the question that we will be debating today. And if I ask each one of us in the room what they think the social economy is, I'm sure we will get equal numbers as the number of people in the room. So looking at those actors, yes, we look at certain legal forms, as we call them, the associations, the foundations, the cooperatives, of course, and the mutual benefit societies. But we're also looking at types of enterprises that are called social enterprises. And despite this diversity, from non-profit making to profit-making entities, there are certain features that we find present in all actors in the social economy. First, putting solidarity and social or environmental purpose over profit, so the purpose over profit. Second, reinvesting most of the profits to carry out activities in the interest either of the members, the collective interest that the enterprise, the social enterprise represents, or the society at large. And also in terms of governance, there's specific features that are called sort of more democratic or participatory type of governance features. And in terms of where do we find these actors in the economy when we look around, there's many sectors, and I would say most economic sectors in which social economy actors are present, from health, of course, or social services, or work integration. Perhaps it's better known or sometimes identified with, but certainly much more industrial sectors, circular economy value chains, agriculture, energy, construction, tourism, textiles, you name it, you find social economy actors. So without further ado, I would like to turn to our panel and briefly say who we have here and directly ask them the first question. So let me first welcome Giuseppe Guerini, on my left. He's both member of the European Economic and Social Committee, but also the president of CECOPA, and you will explain to us what this acronym stands for. Then Agnès Matisse, welcome. She's Secretary General of Cooperatives Europe. Thank you for being with us. Petri Salminen, President of SME United. I think a rather familiar face by now. And Stanislas Debermont, on the other side, Development Manager for Rescoop.eu. And this is the European Federation of Citizen Energy Cooperatives. So we will be debating together the main question, social economy, fringe or mainstream. So what do you think, Giuseppe?
Okay.
2 minutes.
2 minutes. If I talk about EEC, I can say in EEC in the last 10 years we are realized more than 20 opinions on social economy issue. And so for us it's really important issue, and the same for CECOP. CECOP is the European Confederation of Workers, Cooperative, Industrial Cooperatives, and Social Cooperatives. For example, our member is Mondragon Corporation. I think that everyone in the country must know this kind of enterprise. And so for us, social economy is not a fringe, it's the heart of our activity. And now, of course, we are at 5 level question, decision taken by international institutions that put the social economy on the top of the wave. The United Nations resolution on social economy, the ILO resolution on social economy, the OECD resolution on social economy, and one action plan from European Commission, and now one recommendation on social economy. So what we do now is connect the high level and the grassroots.
So mainstream, one vote. Agnès.
Well, I must say, first time I read the title of the workshop, Fringe of Mainstream, I found it a bit provocative because I was a bit surprised. And then I said, okay, maybe it's a good way to introduce the debate. As you introduced me, I'm a General Secretary of Cooperatives Europe, which is the European organization representing cooperative across Europe. I mean, beyond the border of the European Union. And we represent cooperatives that are working according to values and principles, and which is very important, they are owned by men and women. So we speak about members, we don't speak about shareholders. Our companies are involved in various sectors. They are active also, whatever the size they are, mainly small and medium enterprise, but also we've got large companies. And we represent altogether 176,000 enterprise. So talking about fringe regarding that, I must say that's why maybe I was firstly surprised, but I'm looking for the discussion to explain further why.
Okay, fair enough. Petri, what is your view?
Yeah, thank you. And first of all, thanks for the excellent event already so far and the possibility to discuss. I think that I might be the one bringing versatility to this debate, and I'm expected to say the fringe, but I'm gonna, as entrepreneurs tend to do, I'm gonna surprise you all and say social economy itself, or the social aspect of the economy, actually is a mainstream, but looking from the entrepreneur's perspective, it has been that for ages already, as long as there has been entrepreneurs pursuing their own dreams and passions, and that by definition often is purpose before profit.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Stanislas?
Thank you very much. And it's good to be last because then I can build on the answers of the others, which is wonderful. So I have the luxury of representing two organizations today. The Brussels cooperative Brupauer, which is a small cooperative of 250 members currently being deployed in Brussels on energy sharing. And I'll be speaking from that point of view, but as well from the point of view of a development manager of RESCO-PU and the Sector Federation for Energy of Cooperatives Europe and the Federation of Citizen Energy Cooperatives, who represent about 1,200 cooperatives across Europe that are working in the energy sector or on energy services. And I would like to answer from that perspective, from the perspective of the energy sector specifically, and I can tell you that from that perspective, yes, indeed, the social economy is still fringe in terms of the fact that the market is not yet ready for social economy actors. Specifically there, it's interesting to see the amount of volume that is active in terms of the new actors of the social economy coming into the energy sector. And to realize that the sector at the moment is relatively stale. So actually social economy actors such as cooperatives are the one bringing the innovation in. They are the one bringing the new ideas. They are the one bringing the change, and specifically the transition change that we are looking for at the moment. You mentioned the dual transition that we're expecting in Europe. And so that is where really we see a profound change happening in the energy sector. It's the fact that yes, it is still fringe organizations. However, the amount of value that they're bringing to the table is radically different. And so we expect that in 5 to 10 years from here, I can be sitting with Giuseppe and say the same thing, which is we are mainstream now. We can actually create value in the market for everybody.
Okay, that's interesting. So far, first round, social economy, both fringe and mainstream. So let's continue on that basis, because I think that's an interesting basis for the ensuing discussion. At the same time, listening to you, one senses that there are developments and social economy is developing. And this development seems to be rather real than fictional, because we have figures behind it. But I would like to turn to perhaps Agnes and Petri for their views on that, on the aspect of how perhaps social economy is developing. And maybe Agnes, to you first, can we see in the social economy an alternative entrepreneurship model in the EU? I mean, how have you seen social economy developing in that sense? You've been working in that sector for many years now. And do you see any differences in the way that social economy or cooperatives, perhaps more particularly, have been seeing in terms of trends in the last years?
Yes. In fact, cooperative and social economy are not a new phenomenon. They existed for some years. I mean, I'm not going back to history, but we are not something new or very recent. In fact, cooperative and social economy enterprise are created and set up to respond to needs, social needs or environmental needs. And that's very important, that they also have, they doesn't have a goal which is a short-term vision. And their goal is not mainly to make profits. So that element makes them develop. But they are an alternative to other type of enterprise in a sense that they are organized in line with value and principle that distinguish themselves from the other type of enterprise. They are people-based company, enterprise, they are locally rooted. It means that maybe they feel, because of this people-based character, more the evolution of the society and what's going on. And it's true that considering the current challenge and the uncertainty economically, environmentally, but also geopolitically, they are considered like a reference. And also with the development of the and the interest in sustainable development goal, all this raise an interest on this type of enterprise. But it's true that we noticed maybe for 4 or 5 years approximately a new dynamic, a new development. I was going to say that they're also reaching now new interlocutors. We noticed, for example, among the young generation, like you still are, Stanislas, that they raise interest because they respond to value, or maybe they can provide some new goals and new vision of the entrepreneurship world. That said, it's true that that our challenge maybe to our organization, or Giuseppe and mine, is to link these two worlds, what we call the old traditional cooperative that are existing for a long time, and this new movement, this new development, more linked maybe on the idea of sustainability than on the idea of really to have an enterprise that is working according to principle. So yes, there is a new development. Yes, there is a new interest on the cooperative and social economy, but it's not something new. Thank you.
Petri, do you see this new development? Do you sense this dynamism within a social economy? Do you see social enterprises more present in the single market? And perhaps what does this mean to you as president of SME United?
Well, based on researches and based on what I see and representing the first round of millennials myself, we all know, and what researchers say is that millennials 80, 90 after millennium born, we tend to attach more, we tend to be more value driven in whatever we do, and that of course has its impact on entrepreneurship as well. If we think of the startup boom a decade ago, it's basically at its core, it's idea of changing the world, pursuing some passion that you or your team might have by taking a risk. Well, that's a definition of entrepreneurship as well. So yes, I'm seeing the development, I'm seeing the more value-driven companies, but actually, has it still been the same already before when dealing with entrepreneurs who are putting their own money, taking the risk of testing, trying something new, if it meets the demand or need that market has. And in that sense, one might call me naive, but I believe that also market mechanism, market economy is the driver of a better world, because it is based on the customer need, and entrepreneurs, we are the ones answering to it.
Okay, it's interesting to see the coexistence of things, of different aspects. I think this is perhaps what we would like to see in terms of dynamism for the single market that we all want to serve. So maybe taking a closer look now at what social economy is, or social entrepreneurship, let's call it like that, is. From that point of view, perhaps it would be interesting to look more closely at the challenges and opportunities. Yes, there is development, perhaps not all of it is new, but some of it is new, but what does it mean in terms of challenges and opportunities, perhaps, Stanislas, for you, not only in terms of being a young entrepreneur, but also working with the type of cooperatives in a sector which is in full transition, the energy sector. What does it mean to you to be part of a citizens' energy cooperative? Is it an opportunity or a challenge? How do you see it in your everyday life?
Well, first I have to say thank you very much for being the young person on the panel. I think it's a wonderful place to be in. I will obviously not speak from the point of view of a generation. I think that would be misplaced. But I would like to speak from the point of view of what is happening to us in Brussels, because I feel like the experience that is happening to us in Brussels is quite unique. The Brussels regulator has opened a new market following the publication of the Clean Energy Package called energy sharing, which is, some would call, from the business perspective, a blue ocean market. No competition, no rules there, basically everybody coming in at the same time. And indeed what we see in Brussels is a vitality of SMEs, of large companies, of cooperatives that are coming in at the same time. And I have to say that our cooperative, Brewpower, is well placed because we stand on the shoulders of giants. And I think Agnes mentioned it, this relationship that exists intrinsically between, some would say, older cooperatives. We call them the infrastructure cooperatives, the one that are already in there. It's an opportunity because we get to build on what was already built before. we are not alone. And I think that's a core value of the cooperative movement, which is cooperation before competition. And the fact that we can cooperate as a network with our partners in the cooperative movement is something that made us strong. In terms of just the challenges and opportunity, for me, it's a little bit of both. From the perspective of, I don't know if it's an entrepreneur, but from the perspective of a founder of a cooperative. The first thing is we are definitely a little bit slower. It's clear. I mean, if I look at the other SMEs in our market, they develop very fast, mobilize capital very fast, but the reality is that we're also more democratic, and so we're more resilient through time. What we see already happening now in the Brussels market, which is something that opened a year ago, is already consolidation. Large companies coming in, purchasing some of the most promising startups that are in our market. And we see that obviously as a loss of value for the entire market and for especially the Brussels consumers. The second part is the difficulty to scale. Obviously, it's very difficult to scale a social business because we are not driven by financial KPIs, which are difficult to understand for the financial sector, for the type of investors that usually are used for the scaling. But we're definitely more resilient in terms of we are actually sitting on a base of members which are loyal to the project, to the political project that we have as a cooperative. And that I can say with confidence, considering the last energy crisis that we had, that despite a spike in the price crisis, our members stayed with us and trusted us to continue the work that we promised them to do. The second part is obviously it's a little bit more difficult to balance, and there is definitely a sort of a political project behind it, right? The goal of Brewpower is to promote the transition in Brussels, which is not the case for most of the structural actors of the market. And so that requires conversations, that requires a balance. But at the same time, it also means that we are more efficient and more societally responsible. And I think that's really what I would like to point out in terms of this economic system that we're trying to build. It's about recognizing what everybody is good at. And I think the social economy is good at creating co-benefits. It's good at creating value from the societal, environmental, economic perspectives at the local level. And obviously we are perfectly happy, and we already do that, collaborating with SMEs in our market, collaborating with large companies in our market that offer a different type of service to our members, services that we will not or we're not interested in providing. But at the same time, it's important to stay in its lane. And what we see, unfortunately, and that's probably the biggest barrier that we have today as a social business, is certain companies that are claiming the space of social enterprises, even though they have no business being here. And it's about definitions. I mean, obviously, the energy market is heavily regulated. So we do have an issue with the definition of energy communities and this type of legal requirements. But at the same time, I think it's important to recognize the value of one another, and at the same time, the potential for collaboration.
Thank you for that. I'd like to turn to Giuseppe now, and I don't know if you want to use Italian. Okay, so please reach out to your headphones for the Italian interpretation when Giuseppe speaks. Giuseppe, you have been working in cooperatives and with cooperatives and more broadly social enterprises for quite some time now. So what type of ambition do you set for cooperatives today, in today's world, which clearly not the same as 30 or 40 years ago, or when the cooperative movement was born, much more complex with very concrete challenges. We talked about climate change, we talked about, and we're very much facing everyday life, digital divide, security, supply chains, globalization, deglobalization, etc. So for you, what ambition do you set for the cooperatives today, and do you see more opportunities or more challenges?
Thank you very much. I switch to Italian, and thank you to allow me to speak Italian. Beh, io credo che
Well, I believe that you need to be able to transform challenges into opportunities. And this is something that cooperatives, which represent a lot of my life, have shown they're able to do throughout their history. Now, looking at some of the biggest challenges we have to face, these are challenges that involve all businesses and all citizens, the whole of Europe. In particular, we have inclusive competitiveness. That's a challenge. Another challenge is providing services services that guarantee the European path to well-being, giving sustainability to that effort. And that's something that in Italy, with our social cooperatives, we've seen that we're able to step up to the plate. If you look at digitalization, that's a challenge for all European businesses across Europe. But we, in our sector, can do something very special, a particular aspect of the challenge, which is how to ensure that even the digitalized economy, we ensure democratic participatory economies. We've seen a lot of growth of the big businesses, the super big businesses recently, the big digitalized businesses. And we face a situation where to try and keep a democratic bit in this developing economy is a big challenge. It's a challenge for the political side as well. But we need to keep a close connection between what we do and what the EU does, which represents the only part of the world where there's an alternative being offered between compete digitalized American model economy, market only, market choices and nothing but the market, or the Asiatic market. I know it's a superficial shortcut to call it the Asiatic market, but basically where the control economy by the public government basis is the way they've chosen. I mean, let's look at the digital service market, the internal digital market, and the data governance. Those three directives that govern these three areas in the EU, they're a very important aspect. I mean, if you look at the data directive, it's no accident that they actually talk specifically about the data cooperatives. We talk about Uberization of the economy, about a platform economy. Well, the cooperative model is a slightly different angle on there, where people can be involved in everything. It's not just cooperatives, it's SMEs as well. Take an SME. What does an SME do if it wants to have a database of which it will keep its own sovereignty within the AI world without having to outsource it? Well, we're talking about cooperatives between SMEs, in this case, mutualizing their data in the scenario I'm describing, creating value out of their data, but the data would remain their own possession in their own sovereignty and within their own country. Let's look at another challenge, mobility. In France, they've carried out some very interesting experience. Probably the experience that's most challenging is RACOP, which was the following: keeping transport services in areas where the state is stepping back because those aren't profitable routes. Well, they tried setting up a cooperative to set up, say, a new railway line, or keep an old railway line was being closed down because it wasn't profitable. And that's what they've tried to do. This Mobicorp answered the challenge of particularly rural inhabitants of France to have transport and car sharing or other solutions where the platforms don't have an interest because there aren't enough customers. So there's no point having a network there from their point of view. So these are the sort of things we've been looking at. Cooperation, collaboration between social economy actors, cooperatives and so on, and the broader business world is very useful too when it comes to sustainable development goals, for instance. We've had a lot of interesting experiences and experiments in Italy, notably between cooperatives that deals with disadvantaged people trying to be inserted into the work market, working with businesses, not only to help people with disabilities, but also creating industrial partnerships through which skills and investment capacity of a big business can join with the potential of a cooperative. We have cooperatives cooperatives that 20 years ago were doing just very ordinary things, like felling a little bag, or for people with disabilities, doing very simple, basic things, decoration and filling bags. And now they're doing something much more interesting, able to develop new opportunities, new activities, much more sophisticated activities, which are more inclusive and offer new opportunities to these same people. So that's an example of some of the things we've been able to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Giuseppe, for sharing those insights. Indeed, perhaps the scale of challenges we're facing today is much bigger or much more complex compared to the past, but at the same time, this in itself can present more opportunities, including for cooperation. And that's perhaps worth looking at a bit more in depth. Is it possible to build synergies, type of cooperation between social enterprises and what we call mainstream businesses? Yes or no? How? I'm looking at the far end, Petri and Stanislas, for your views. We can make it happen, but how is the question?
Yeah, I think I touched on it briefly in answering the previous question, and I'll let Peter obviously, clarify and magnify. I think there are two things that need to be very clear. The first one is cooperation is absolutely essential. Especially the luxury that I have is that our sector is facing probably the biggest challenge in human history with climate change. And so in a way, we don't have the luxury to let anybody go. We have to collaborate as a sector to transition to a clean energy world in order to make sure that we survive, not to actually gain market share or make profit in a certain way for our shareholders. So absolutely, collaboration is essential. And in order to promote that collaboration, we need to have at the same time the right assessment tools and to recognize the objectives that we have in the market to start with. Is it a social objective? Is it an environmental objective? What exactly as public power do we want to achieve? And therefore, how do we encourage the right actors to do so? And so for me, if we're clear with the objectives and if we are bold in promoting policies that are benefiting from, what each of the sectors do best, right? We talk about the third sector between the cooperative and social economy and the traditional market-based sector. If we can promote those bold policies, we will be able to see beautiful things happen. And we see a lot of cooperatives that are not only, collaborating with industrial actors or with large players, with SMEs, but also co-creating solutions together. Obviously on the base of, a democratic control between entities, but with still the opportunity for market profits for the traditional SME sector. And we see that in open source data, which is a very popular thing. We see that in the energy sector with co-development, and that happens a lot. We see that as well with all the procedures with public participation, for example, which, to my own surprise, many SMEs in Belgium, in France, in Germany are coming up to us and telling us, can you help us? Can you help us get reach of citizens? Can you help us get in touch with cooperatives? And we see many cooperative federations also making that work of creating that opportunity for collaboration. So definitely there is a space. But once again, recognizing and assessing why are we doing this without doing it, for no reason at all.
Mm-hmm. So making business together possible? Petri, what do you think?
Yeah, again, looking it through my glasses, it's that networking, cooperation, that's the basis of every company and economy, with social or something else. But so definitely possible and something that is needed as well, as long as the, let's say, rules in some game, they are fair, they are the same for every player, because we cannot try to achieve something significant together if somebody is playing the different game or with different rules. So that goes without saying. And when Giuseppe described the cooperative nature and the democracy of let's say, ownership or democracy in working life. My own company, I've been recruiting people, recruitment consultant, and I do know that not everyone wants to be involved in decision making. There are a huge number of people that just want to secure a paycheck month after month, and somebody else taking the risk and making the innovations, and that has to be allowed as well. And therefore, it's good that we have different forms of participation also in business and working life.
Okay, that's very interesting. And Petri, you mentioned rules, and I think it's relevant to think of that, of rules and the regulatory framework, not only when we talk about SMEs, and that's a very important topic, certainly for the SME Assembly and for the SMEs in the single market, but also when we talk about the social economy at large. We spend a lot of time also debating the basic question: do we need an adapted regulatory framework for the social enterprise or the social economy? Is it necessary? Do we need to talk more about specificities or not? So perhaps I'd like to turn to those on the panel representing, let's say, social economy, perhaps the longest, Agnes and Giuseppe. For you, based on your experience, what type of benefits do you see in an adapted regulatory framework for social enterprises, for cooperatives? And how can this work within a broader framework of measures or a so-called enabling business environment for SMEs at large? So what type of rules in the single market?
That's a big question, and it's true that we are working on this for several years now. But it's true that the development of social and cooperative economy is held back by the fact that we don't have a proper regulation framework that is adapted to our specificities. I mean, simply because our specificities is like in line with ownership. I say we're talking about member, not a shareholder, in line with our structure, in line with our governance, request some specific rules, request some specific adaptation. And in fact, what we need is simply a level playing field for our companies. It's no more than that. And there is something that I would like to be very clear. We are not asking for advantages. Because very often we hear that, oh, your enterprise, they have some advantages because they have some specific rules that are different from the traditional business. It's not in line with advantage. It's simply to have a link between our structure, our governance, and the regulatory framework that we could benefit of. And it's very important to have this view on the impact of the future on current regulatory framework, simply because I will provide you with a concrete example. Currently, there is a discussion on the European sustainability reporting framework. There are several projects that are in discussion in line with sustainable requirement. And here we could see that there could be a conflict with our cooperative governance in line with the reporting activity that we've got. I think it's in your country, Petri, that some project could in fact conflict with the cooperative reporting auditing system in Finland. So that, I think, is very important to avoid this kind of conflict that would impede the cooperative to develop their activities. And maybe what we should have from the public authorities, whatever be at European level or national level, is a kind of cooperative reflex, in the sense that you're working very much within SME United on the SME test, and we would appreciate that this SME test would encompass to the impact of a regulation on the diversity of business model. But it's not only avoiding conflict with our regulatory framework and specificities, it's also to provide to cooperative, social enterprise and social economy in general a specific measure, regulatory framework, which enable them to boost their activities and maybe to avoid some failure like the one from Railway Corp that you described, Giuseppe, because I was a member of this railway COP, and I truly believe that we will manage to have this train line, going across France. And we didn't succeed simply because the market is not used to such progress. And not only the market, the stakeholders, the financing people, and the trust. So I think it's very important that we work on issues like develop the skills, financing, and some projects that are described in the Council recommendation for social economy and the action plan that was published 2 years ago, thanks to the work of your unit, Anna, by the way. But for this, there is some precondition that we have to face and overcome. There is a lack of accurate data and statistics on cooperative, and we still have to work on that, because if we don't know and we can promote what we represent, it will be difficult to justify this specific regulatory framework. There is also an insufficient recognition of the added value of this kind of enterprise, and I'm really, really happy that within this SME Assembly 2023, we've got the opportunity to have this workshop and to discuss about it. There is also the fact that there is some administrative and policy capacity of the public authorities regarding cooperative and social economy is very limited. It's something that should be addressed through the ministry in all member states, and currently it's more perceived like a niche. And there is also maybe the legal fragmentation. The fragmentation of the legal framework in which our enterprise are developing their activities. So all this project to overcome and this idea to have a specific regulation for the cooperative and social economy when it's necessary, is it compatible or not with an SME policy? Of course, yes. I mean, it's not two different worlds, it's the same world. We don't want to have as a conclusion that there are this kind of diversity company, a bit special, we don't know a lot about them, that should have a specific approach, meaning like an exception. We are not an exception, we are on the market. We simply need to have the tools to enable us to develop our activities, and in partnership with traditional companies also. It's possible. I think Susan this morning mentioned the point on business transfer, where it's something which is a need from the business world, and then cooperative could provide not the ID, but one ID who can help all the market environmental, sorry, I always have difficulties with this word, environmental world to develop their activity and overcome the challenge.
Thank you, Agnes. Giuseppe, would you have anything to complement? And will you do it in Italian in that case?
I do it in Italian, thank you. Ci sono tanti livelli su cui
There are many levels which it's important to focus when you're coming to legislative initiatives. Some of them are completely in line with the needs of SMEs or cooperatives. So let me give you some concrete examples. Something with the new European industrial strategy rightly identified. When I talked about the social economy in the economy of proximity, 98% of our businesses in the EU are SMEs. They have roots in their local territory. That's an important added value they have. We understand, we know, we see that working within our communities as we do, without being too focused on the financial aspects of the economy, the financialized of economy, means that our capital, our businesses are rooted in the territory. We're residents of territory. That is us, but that needs to be recognized. The EU has taken steps forward in that sense. For instance, on some of the procurement and tendering rules. 20 years ago, for instance, everything was for big players. We were able to get people to accept that SMEs, small proximity businesses, needed to get a look in, and that's been shared and understood. And SMEs and cooperatives themselves, often small or medium-sized, are able to now have a role. Cooperatives and social businesses need to work to back up general interest services, social services, the rollout of looking after people, inclusion services, looking after people in their home. These are all services we provide, but it's these businesses doing it to help the state. It's not the state supporting those businesses who backing up the state. And some of the rules on state aid need to be changed to reflect that. I think provocatively, I would say that if the EU had given as much state aid as has been given to big business, arms industry, energy industry, and so forth, or the oil industry and so forth, we'd be in a different place now, a fairer place, and I think a more inclusive place. So, depending on what you focus on, I think public procurement, state aid, these are two essential pillars where the single market is resting on, but this market needs to be more accessible, including to the social market economy, to the social economy. Now, a few weeks ago, a proposal was made on cross-border operations of non-profits. That's a great opportunity for a single market that has a social dimension to it. Take insurance. Insurance for health services of citizens. They could work anywhere in Europe, but the mutual organizers are part of social economy. If a mutual organizer from France wants to work in Italy, they have to set up a new setup in Italy. But a big business, an insurance company, can be cross-border because they've got a footprint on the stock market, but a small mutual business, like the one I described, can't do that. Now, the single market has done a lot. It's one of the cornerstones of the EU. It's made huge progress. We've done huge progress. But if you look at 1957, when the beginnings of the EEC were being created, the vocation was partly to focus on a social dimension of the market as well. And I think now we're beginning to significantly remember that. The next point I'd like to mention is on the tax aspect. In the Economic and Social Committee, they've often called for this, by the way, but taxation rates that aren't doing favors to anybody, not favors to us or anybody, but recognizing our businesses when they provide a general interest service. That's the first one. Secondly, if these businesses, under law, because of their statutes, if they reinvest rather than handing back to shareholders when they have profits, that's intergenerational local economic cooperation. It's not somebody's property. It's a mutualized approach. That's what cooperatives do, and that should be understood. And when we're looking at the BFIT and other proposals in the pipeline about taxation and what's going to happen in the next around 2030, all these kind of special needs should be considered. And the next point I'd like to mention is access to credit. This is also something we've talked about a lot before. Cooperatives start off with very little capital. Low-level capital. At the beginning, you have relatively little, but banking ratings and banks generally look at capital rather than inherent assets very often, which penalizes our system, particularly cooperatives, in having access to credit. For a long time, we've been asking for rules for international banking regulators, not just the EU, but we've been asking for this for some time, saying that when a big business gets a bank loan, they have to set aside capital requirements as part of the capital obligation of the bank, and they have to set aside capital for that loan, etc. Now, if it's a retail loan, they have to set aside more risk capital because the risk is deemed to be higher at the retail level. And yet, we've seen what the banks did when they were lending to big companies, and they still took silly risks. So, as far as that goes. But if if you take the Banca d'Italia data in Italy, actually it's probably because we get so little loans, we cooperatives are actually better at repaying those loans than big business are. But statistically, that seems to be the case. So given what these SMEs are doing, given what cooperatives are doing, which is so valuable, supporting those SMEs is surely something worthwhile, because actually it means that because of what I just said, it should be easier for banks to help SMEs, to give loans to SMEs. To some extent, that's already happening. But when it comes to cooperatives, we treat it like family loans, which is even more risky. A small change like that, a small, let's say, accounting calculation mechanism, if it was changed, could make a huge difference for cooperatives. And these are some of the examples of what can be done with tweaking the rules that can be very significant in their impact. One last point, that comes to alignment between our 27 member states. We have big differences in our respective countries at all these different levels of rules, the rules that apply. So the big recommendation we would make, and that we've also talked about it before, and the Commission has, and we're thankful for that, done a great deal with the social economy unit in the Commission leading the way there. But we need more of a level playing field above and beyond what they've already done. We need an internal market. We believe it's important, but we need a level playing field, including for us. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And actually listening to you, I must say, questions about level playing field, access to funding, business support, or even lack of skills, etc. These are kind of cross-cutting issues that SMEs are facing as well. Perhaps what is the difference or the essence of this debate is the fine letter on this, and what also Agnes was saying, at least making sure that the rules in the single market and how they are implemented and how the single market operates does not exclude a way of doing business differently, perhaps, which is the social economy way of doing business. But Petri, I want you, I know that you want to come in, but I'm also mindful, I would like also to open the floor for questions. Please, Petri, for a quick reaction. Yes.
Thank you. Basically, you described what I was about to say, that because what Giuseppe described, the list there, state aid, public procurement, taxation, access to capital, that applies to SME world, entrepreneur world perfectly, and also, when you said cooperatives are better paying back their loans than big companies, I just last week had a good discussion with the bank director, and he said to me that I wonder the entrepreneurs that how with those figures they are paying back all of their loans, because they don't have orders in their order books and no incomes, but still they are paying their loans. And one entrepreneur were asked from the director that if he could take personal loan, to company loans to his personal responsibility. So that applies to entrepreneurs as well beautifully. So just.
Well, I think entrepreneurs face similar issues, whether they are social entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs of a smaller or small and medium enterprise. So turning to the room, if you have any questions to our panelists. Also, those of you watching us online, the floor is open. Anything that you found intriguing, difficult to understand, anything that you disagree with? Or any point that you would like to hear more, our panelists to elaborate? I think we solved all the issues.
Yeah, it would be nice to have at least some sort of a bit of disagreement also. Yeah. Since then we can call it a debate.
Okay, maybe we can, that gives us a chance, I mean, we have a little bit less than 5 minutes left for a kind of wrap-up based on what we heard so far. If we want to give, let's say, if we were to give ourselves a rendezvous in 10 years from now, debating still the same question, what would we like to have as the key message at the time of that discussion? Or at least, what is the one issue that we would like to have resolved in between? At least I can tell you one at the end, perhaps myself, but please, Petri, go ahead.
After 10 years, I'm confident, being naive once again, that entrepreneurship, risk-taking passionate individuals have solved the major crisis that we are seeing currently when it comes to sustainability and so on.
Yeah. Thank you. Agnes?
We could say 10 years ago we were asking if it was fringe or mainstream, and now we could say how are we going to further develop our collaboration for a strong SME policy?
Yes, Giuseppe.
For me, is I wish we can meet here in 10 years to constate that the poverty in Europe is really reduced. That more people is at work, more young people, more women is at work, and we reduce the poverty. This is our task, and I think we share this achievement with the social pillar program coming from the European Union, but also with the new industrial strategy, because to make more competitive and more strong our industrial sector, we need to have also more people involved and more people that live well in Europe.
Okay, Stanislas.
Well, I think in line with what Giuseppe is saying, I hope that in 10 years from now, I will not be here because, we'll have reached the objectives on the climate that we need to be reached, and I'll be taking a holiday or doing something else. Agriculture, maybe, why not? But I would say in terms of policy purely, if I had to pick, I would say one of the biggest challenges that is facing us, and I hope that we're going to be able to solve it, is a part of that conversation that we just had, which is where do we draw the line to recognize the co-benefits that are being brought by the social economy, and how do we make that palatable for public authorities, for other businesses in general, when recognizing the benefits that are being created by social economy. And that we don't necessarily are driven by financial indicators only or by market indicators, but we are driven by something else, something that is more core maybe to the European society, something that was highlighted by Giuseppe and Agnes in terms of creating the world of tomorrow. That we all, live in communities that are thriving, that are for themselves, by themselves, and where somehow the ownership and control is back in the hands of who it should be in, which is the citizens of Europe.
That's a very good way of wrapping things up. I hope this discussion allowed all of us perhaps to leave this room not necessarily with a dichotomy in our heads between social enterprises and social economy and the rest of the economy, because perhaps it's not exactly like that, in the sense that we can do business, but this business can be done in different ways. And perhaps one way of helping to push this dichotomy out of our heads and out of our markets or societies is perhaps back to the young generation or the education and the training we give to this generation. It's true, if you look at formal education, all we teach our children, and perhaps what we have been taught ourselves, is that if you want to set up a business, you need this is the model, think of capital, think of shareholders, think of profit, think of this, think of that. All of this is valid, and that shouldn't go away in any way, but at the same time, perhaps there's other ways of generating value, both in economic terms and otherwise. And us living in Europe and having the challenge and the luxury to be in a part of the world where we are concerned about how to achieve the green and the digital transition in a way that includes the people and have an economy that works for people, perhaps this is an area that we can promote more, we can make more visible, more understood. Also because it could be a viable way for us to address the challenges that we're faced with now, and who knows also in 10 years from now. So thank you for your attention, for your interest, and a big applause to our panelists, because I think it was very exciting listening to you.